Yo, what is up everyone, and welcome back to another Borderlands 3 video. Today I bring you guys my Mayhem 4 Amara build. Recently I uploaded a Mayhem 3 Amara build in which I completed the solo mellow on takedown, but this time around we're going to do a Mayhem 4 build. Now the difference between both is that the Mayhem 3 build was focused on the red tree for elemental damage, but for Mayhem 4, you gotta treat all badass enemies and normal enemies as mini bosses because they have so much health. So we're gonna focus more on the blue tree to reach Avatar and combine it with Phase Zerker. Now I know there's a new class mod for Amara being the spiritual driver, but we're not gonna focus on this because as of now the drop rate for this is pretty low, and I want people to be able to do this build as much people as possible. So for now we're gonna use a Phase Zerker. Later on this year I'll go ahead and upload Mayhem 4 build based around the driver class mod. So anyways, as always, we'll go over the skill tree itself, then over the weapons, and then over some gameplay. We'll show the synergies. Let's get right into it. So you're gonna want to start off on the red tree. You're gonna put 5 points into Anima, max out Infusion, max out Tempest, get Dread, Deep Well, Indiscriminate, and 2 points into Sustainment. Now very quick before we move on to the other tree, I want to let you guys know that if you guys do not want to run Infusion, that's completely your call. As you know, Infusion converts a portion of your damage into your action skill element, but if you plan on running every single element as your weapons and you don't mind switching between all of them, then go ahead and put 3 points into Steady Hands and 2 into Wildfire. That's completely up to you. It's not going to make a difference. The only reason why I use this is because whenever I use my Cutsman, either corrosive or fire, I can shred shields if I have shock as my action skill element. But like I said, it's completely up to you. If you don't mind switching for every element specific to what damage type you're trying to do, then do not put any points into Infusion. You're better off just using a weapon that does that type of damage. Now let's move on to the blue tree, and you're going to want to put 5 points into Do Harm, because we're going to be using Ties That Bind, and I already uploaded a video about this, but as you guys know, Ties That Bind is action skill damage, so you have to max this out. Get 3 points into Fast Hands, because you're going to want to be switching weapons fast. I understand that reload speed is important with Alacrity, but I feel like Fast Hands is much more important. Then you want to put 1 point into Violent Tapestry. Next, I like to put 5 points into Restless, 2 into Alacrity. You want to put a point into Ascendant, 3 into Wrath, 3 into Laid Bare, 2 to From Rest, and your last point you put it on Avatar. Now let's go over our weapons. So I like to take a Brainstormer. You guys know this is my favorite weapon, and I happen to have a very good anointment on it. On action skill end, my next 2 magazines will have 50% additional bonus incendiary damage. So what I like to do with my build is I like to run shock damage as my action skill element. I put Stillness of Mind as my augment and Ties That Bind as my action skill. So even though I have Infusion and shock element here, the Brainstormer is not really affected that much. You're still going to shred shields, so that's why I still run a shock weapon, because a lot of people run Infusion and they don't run a weapon that matches their action skill element. But really, the Brainstormer isn't really affected that much by it. Of course, it's being affected. Every weapon is affected by it. But you still shred through shields. You can't even tell the difference. So that's why I use this. And it's going to give me 50% additional incendiary damage after action skill use for the next 2 magazines. So I'm going to be shredding enemies that have red health bars once I burn through their shields. Then I like to run an incendiary weapon on my second slot. That's completely up to you what weapon you take. I like to take this Cutsman just because the Cutsman is an absolute beast. For my third slot, this is my baby, guys. This is my baby. Check this out. This weapon does corrosive damage. And then it says on action skill end, the next 2 magazines will have 50% additional bonus incendiary damage. So when my action skill end, I'm going to be doing both corrosive and incendiary. And guess what? I'm running Infusion with shock damage. This weapon does all 3 damages, so at times you'll see me just use this weapon the whole time. It just carries me through everything. I just hope that I can find a different weapon that has this anointment on it. That would be great. And for my final slot, I have a Moira Linoge. You don't have to run this. In fact, let me tell you what I actually run. I just don't want to include it on this build because I want this build to be universal so everyone can use it. I use a face puncher that gives me terror whenever I do melee attacks, and as you know, the face puncher is a shotgun that does melee attacks. All the bullets are actually melee attacks, so I apply terror to myself, and then I have this transformer that while terrified reduce incoming damage, and then I have this Merv Hex. While terrified I gain increased damage and fire rate. The more terror you have, the higher the bonus. Now, I'm not going to include the face puncher on this build just because of the reason I said, but if you really want to go all out with this build, a face puncher with extra terror with melee attacks is the way to go, and then combine it with a shield with this anointment and a grenade with this anointment, you're absolutely going off. For the class mod, I take a Phaserker. On action skill use, I gain my max rush stack count, so that's going to be a total of 25 rush stacks because this Phaserker gives me 5 extra, and I already have 10 from the initial part of the blue tree, and then 10 more from the end with this one, with Avatar. So that's 25 rush stacks in total. And for every rush stack that I have, I gain 3% weapon damage and 10% action skill cooldown rate. So I'm just going to get those bonuses regardless. And for my artifact, I have an Elemental Projector Victory Rush. This artifact has been out since the game came out, so I'm assuming everyone watching this build, or almost everybody, has one of these in handy. This really does come in handy, guys, especially if you're fighting mobs. You're always going to be affected by status effect, random status effects everywhere, and this is just gonna boost that elemental damage for 90%. Now let's break down the skills. Anima and Tempest, of course, are going to increase your elemental damage. Anima is actually going to increase your status effect damage and duration, and Tempest is going to increase your elemental damage overall. Your shock damage is going to get an extra 20% aside from that 30% increase. Infusion is going to convert a portion of your damage dealt by your weapons into your action skill element, and like I said, if you don't mind switching between all 3 elements, you can go ahead and scrap Infusion and put the points into Steady Hands and Wildfire. Dread is going to provide you with more gun damage after you grasp an enemy, and if you shoot that grass enemy and kill it, your weapon is instantly reloaded. Then Indiscriminate is going to give you a ricochet chance, and that ricochet chance is upped even further when you're shooting a face grasped enemy. Deep Well is going to increase the size of your magazine in elemental weapons, so usually we love to run elemental weapons, so almost all our weapons are going to get an increase. If you run a Maggie, I love using a Maggie from time to time. This won't help the Maggie out, but every other weapon like a Brainstormer or a Cutsman, you're going to get a bigger magazine size. Sustainment is just going to help you stay alive because Mayhem 4, you know, enemies aren't really too aggressive. They're the same as Mayhem 3, but the difference is they have a lot of health, so you're going to have a harder time killing them. They're not going to hurt you more, but they are going to be alive longer, and it's just going to be tough, so you need sustainment. Do Harm and Violent Tapestry provide you with rush stacks, so every time you activate your action skill, you consume those rush stacks, and depends on how many rush stacks you consume, you get bonuses. With Do Harm, your action skill damage is increased based on the number of rush stacks consumed, and with Violent Tapestry, your status effect chance are increased based on the number of rush stacks consumed. And thanks to Phaserker, which automatically gives you max rush stacks when you activate your action skill, you'll always have max rush stacks, and these will always get the max effectiveness. Now, Fast Hands is going to increase your reload speed, weapon swap speed, mode switch speed, and we also have Alacrity, which will basically increase your reload speed based on the number of rush stacks. Now, if you don't care for Fast Hands, you don't care about switching speed, and you just want fast reload, then I suggest you put all 5 points into Alacrity. That's completely up to you, but I like to put Fast Hands because switching weapons is also just as important as reloading, at least in my opinion. Then Restless is going to increase your action skill cooldown rate whenever you're playing, especially mobbing. You want to have your action skill available as fast as possible, so maxing this out is very important. Ascendant is going to increase your action skill augments. In this case, we are using Stillness of Mind, so whenever enemies are affected by Stillness of Mind and you shoot them, they're going to stay in that Stillness of Mind phase for 0.75 seconds longer, otherwise they will instantly break off of it. Laid Bare and Wrath are going to increase your damage. With Wrath, you just get a base gun damage of 20%, and after you use your action skill, you get another 20% for 8 seconds. with Laid Bare, enemies that are affected by your action skill are going to gain 25% more damage from all sources. So since we're using ties that bind, you grasp an enemy and those links, whenever they share the damage, that's already considered action skill damage. So all those enemies affected by ties that bind are going to gain 25% more damage taken. So it's just going to give you a lot more damage. From Rest is going to increase your fire rate, therefore increasing your DPS. Charge time is also increased since we're using a Cutsman which has charge time. It's very good to have this skill. And finally, Avatar. Avatar is going to increase our max rush stacks. Additionally, you can use your action skill while it's still cooling down. So essentially you can use your action skills twice as much. And additionally, if your action skill kills an enemy, it refunds half of your rush stacks. So essentially you're using ties that bind. Even though you're shooting the enemies, it's considered action skill damage. So all those enemies that die, they're just going to refund you your rush stacks, and you're always going to get half of your rush stacks back. Anyways guys, that's it. This is basically the build. The reason why I focused on the blue tree is because the blue tree is normally for boss builds or boss fighting, to farm bosses. But with Mayhem 4, enemies just have so much health that you have to resort to a most boss build for this. And unfortunately we couldn't put any points into the green tree, because if we did that, we were going to sacrifice sustainment from the red tree, and sustainment is very important, especially on the Mayhem levels. And like I said, later on I'll bring out a different build that involves the new class mod, which is arguably Amara's best class mod to date. It's just I didn't want to do it over that class mod, because recently I made a video on how to find that class mod, and a lot of people have spent hours and hours looking for it and they still don't have it. So I just wanted to make a more universal build with this one. Like I said, in the future I'll bring up a different build that involves the driver class mod. Anyways guys, hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you guys for watching. If you did enjoy it, please help me out by hitting that like button and subscribing for more content, and I'll see you guys on the next video. Peace.